This is the all-new Garmin Epix with a bright 1.3-inch AMOLED touchscreen display. Technically, this is the second generation of the Epix device, but the truth is, it's much more of a Fenix 7 with all the latest and greatest features that Garmin has to offer. Now, I've been swimming, biking, and running with this watch for a little over a week now, and I figured it's time to talk about why I was so wrong about the Garmin Epix 2. To me, this watch feels like Garmin is taking their Fenix line in a whole new direction, rather than, this being an all new product. And if you're not familiar with Garmin's Fenix line, it's kind of their top of the line, rugged, outdoor, do everything watch. The primary difference between the Fenix and the Epix is this all new AMOLED 416 by 416 pixel 1.3-inch touchscreen display. And this is gonna sound very counterintuitive, but it's kind of this screen that actually had me question the Epix 2 over the Fenix 7. I really wasn't sure that I wanted a bright screen on my wrist, as opposed to the usual workhorse transflective displays that are typically found on these sports watches. But I'll get into kind of my overall purchasing thoughts here in a little bit. First, I do want to go over just the basics about this new watch. Now, Garmin has a couple of versions and prices for you to choose from when picking an Epix. So it's either $899 for the stainless steel version with Gorilla Glass, or $999 for the titanium version with the sapphire lens, which does tend to be a little bit more durable. The titanium version does come in white or black, and the stainless steel just comes in one color, just called slate steel. And the white titanium bezel has a brighter silver coating around it. But during this video, I'll be showing this one, which is the sapphire black titanium variety. And the back of this watch is also made of titanium. And I actually picked up this watch from the Dialed Cycling Lab. I'll leave a link to those guys in the description of this video. And I will check with them about maybe trying to find you guys some sort of discount code. It has been hard to actually get a hold of this watch. So I think it would be super cool if we could find, any sort of deal at this point. But the difference in weight between those two different types of devices is 6 grams. So the claimed weight of 76 grams for the steel version and 70 grams for the titanium. I actually measured, the titanium at 71 grams for, whatever that's worth. But it's definitely not the lightest watch that we've ever tested here on this channel. But for me, at least in my experience, it hasn't felt, too large or too heavy when swimming, biking, or running. And the sapphire version of this watch has 32 gigs of memory, whereas the steel variety has 16 gigs. Now, I measured this watch at 46 millimeters in width and 15.4 millimeters in depth, kind of depending on where you measure depth from. So it's not a small watch by any means. Here's how it looks on my very dainty man wrists, and here's how it looks on my wife's wrists. This new Epix has Garmin's newest optical heart rate monitoring system. They call it, the Garmin Elevate 4.0 heart rate sensor. It'll monitor things like your pulse ox and your heart rate, and I found it to be pretty accurate. Generally speaking, I've noticed that larger watches sometimes have difficulty. They tend to bounce a little bit more, which can be a problem for optical heart rate monitors. Don't forget to kind of snug this watch up before you start, any sort of activity. And if you really need the most accurate heart rate data, definitely consider using a chest strap. Here, for example, in this data, I did have the Garmin 745 attached to a chest strap, whereas the Apple Watch was using an optical heart rate monitor, as well as the Epix 2. And you can tell that it takes just a little bit longer for these two wrist-based optical heart rate monitors to kind of lock onto place. And then after that, it's pretty solid. Now, these watches both have a 22mm silicone watch band with that kind of quick release system, which is really nice to have. But one thing that Dave Dillon mentioned to me, Dave Dillon is from the Chase the Summit channel, he mentioned that there isn't a good way to take the actual watch pins out of these. Typically, you basically have this spring-loaded pin. It's not easy to get them out, but it is possible. Garmin did respond and they said, it's to increase durability. Personally, I've never had any issues with the older pin version that's spring-loaded that you can actually take out. So I'm not exactly sure what the deal is with that, but definitely figured that I'd let you guys know that the pins are not easily removable. Now, the watch itself just has the 5 standard buttons, and it operates the same way that you're probably used to if you've used Garmin watches in the past, with the major addition that you can now swipe around on this device's touchscreen. Swiping up or down on the watch face brings up the widgets area, which, in all honesty, I'm kind of a big fan of. You can tap and select any widget that you want, then swipe up and down through the widget screens. At any time, swiping from left to right takes you back throughout the operating system. I haven't had this watch a ton of time, maybe just a little over a week, but I'm not experiencing a lot of kind of accidental swipes or touches during kind of my, day-to-day usage. And by default, when I do switch into an activity like swimming, biking, or running, it turns the touchscreen off in favor of the actual buttons, which is definitely smart, in particular for swimming. The only time you might kind of second guess that decision is if you're using the watch for its kind of mapping features, where having a touchscreen and scrolling around and zooming is actually pretty handy. Speaking of maps on this device, you might also notice that the Epix is gonna have just a little bit more detail, for a given map zoom level than its kind of Fenix 7 brothers. Just due to the fact that it has, a little bit more detail provided by that AMOLED screen. Another benefit that I found that was, completely unexpected with this watch was that, swimming with the Epix is actually, really fantastic. The AMOLED screen was really bright and visible when I was underwater. And I know I shouldn't be checking like splits, as I'm doing a flip turn or whatever, but we've done some longer sets, and in all honesty, I forget where I am on really anything longer than like 300 meters. And Garmin, has always been my preferred watch brand for swimming, just because, they include a drill mode, which just allows me to, more accurately capture all the distance that I actually swim in a given workout. So far, I would have to say that this is my favorite watch for swimming that I've really ever tested on this channel. And I've also noticed that the screen was very glanceable, if that's a term, especially like when biking and you just kind of want to glance down and not take your eyes off the road very much. But generally speaking, I didn't have any trouble bike-wise, connecting this watch to a smart bike trainer, 3 different varieties of power meters, a Garmin radar, and a couple of different chest heart rate straps. The Sapphire version of the Epix has the option to turn on the all GPS systems plus multiband, meaning that you can connect to multiple satellite systems at the same time. In this mode, you should see increased GPS accuracy. In particular, if you're struggling with signal because you're up next to a rock wall or a tall building in some sort of downtown urban environment. Otherwise, you might not really notice a difference in that mode. Running or maybe mountain biking are probably the only activities that I might consider, turning something like that on. Probably, in all honesty, it's probably something I would use very rarely. Here is a GPS track comparing the Apple Series 7 watch in blue, review coming on that soon, and the Garmin Forerunner 745, which has really always been very good for me as far as GPS accuracy goes, and that's in red here, and then the Epix in that purple color. And this is a pretty hilly trail run in some thick kind of forest. And, honestly, I think we should be pretty happy with, any of these results. But, I think if we're gonna be super picky here, I think the Epix looks really good. I think the 745 looks good. I think Apple tends to kind of round some turns here just a little bit. But yeah, they're all pretty solid, giving me, accurate distance and decent data. Now, I've been using the Epic Watch with its AMOLED screen in its always on mode, which it's set by default. It does dim the screen just a little bit, and then you kind of just like gesture the watch or move the watch a little bit and the display gets nice and bright. And by default, the brightness is set to 2/3 level for that everyday usage, and then full brightness for activities. You do have the option to change, any of those display settings, and then you can kind of change them differently depending on whether you're in an activity or everyday usage and during sleep. Sleeping with a bright AMOLED screen, it can be a bit of a nightmare. And really that was my, major concern, when I was actually choosing between the Epix and the Fenix. And the reason for the title of this video, I often find these AMOLED screens super annoying while sleeping, and I initially thought that I would prefer the normal transflective display of like something like the Fenix 7, but now, I do think that I was wrong. So far, I'm not finding the AMOLED screen annoying at all, not even at night when I was expecting for, some sort of gesture to shine bright and kind of light up the room. But they've made it really easy. You can actually just kind of switch it into sleep mode using Garmin's kind of quick menu system here, or you can set times for it to go into that sleep mode automatically. And I find, sleeping with that sleep mode hasn't been an issue, at least for me personally. Also, from that quick menu, you can turn off the touchscreen, at any time. Technically, you'll save just like a very, very small amount of battery life. It's nothing that you would ever notice. Also, turning that display from always on to gesture mode takes the battery life from a claimed 6 days to about 16 days. So, that's a huge way to increase battery life. And it also, goes to show, just how big of a hit these AMOLED screens take to the battery life of these devices. I'm using this watch, pretty much just as it comes stock by default, other than doing some testing with that kind of dual frequency multi GPS setting. But I'm seeing about 5 or 6 days of battery life, and I'm doing about an hour or so of GPS activities per day on average, just for your reference. Using that dual frequency GPS or the GPS plus multi-band mode does come at the expense of some battery life, but you do have a few options. You can set the watch to GPS only, and you can get about 30 hours of GPS life. Might be ideal if you're, running a 100-mile ultra run or something like that. Or you can do the all systems, which is probably what most of us would use for just normal activities. It would be a good balance between, accurate GPS tracking and battery life, and you'll get about 24 hours of battery life using that. If you're doing an Ironman, I'd probably do something like that. I think most of the Ironman races I've done don't really have like tricky GPS locations, like dense forest cover or running next to sheer rock walls, or maybe there may be some races that have tall buildings, which could cause some issues. But the GPS plus multi-band, it really is designed for those tricky conditions, and it will only go about 15 hours, which is still pretty impressive. And then as far as new software features goes, Garmin has something called their new real-time stamina tool, which allows athletes to kind of monitor and track their exertion. For example, during like a running race or a very long bike ride, you can see how much theoretical energy you have left before bonking. I haven't tested that much yet, but I'll definitely do that in some future videos. There's also a new visual race predictor feature, which takes into account running history and your overall fitness, and that should help provide you with more accurate race estimations for some of those kind of popular distances, 5K, 10K, marathon, things like that. These are all in addition to, all of the stuff that Garmin has been developing for years to track your fitness or your stress or your recovery. Tools like Garmin's body battery, your fitness age, or Garmin's sleep widget, which I really like. It goes into detail on, how well you slept with a sleep score, but it also breaks down, all the details of each night so you can see how the different sleep stages progressed. But probably one of my favorite new software features on this watch is the ability to manage data screens and settings on this watch, or you can use your smartphone. And I know that it seems like a small thing, but I think it's really nice to have the bigger smartphone to manage, your activities and your apps on the device and change data types on specific data screens within each activity type. So overall, I really like this particular watch. I really thought that I would dislike the AMOLED screen and the shorter battery life that it causes, but so far I really like it. And I do have a lot more testing to do for sure. I'm looking forward to, testing this device with some open water swimming when the water gets a little bit warmer. I'm planning on comparing the multi-band GPS against Coros Vertix 2, which also has the multi-band GPS, just to see which one happens to be more accurate. I really want to compare this watch against the Fenix 7, but it's just taking me a little bit of time to get my hands on a Fenix 7. And of course, I'll make a video talking about this watch after having used it for 100 days. Just all the usual stuff that you get on this channel. But until then, be sure to get out there, swim, bike, run, rinse, and then repeat it all over again. And we will see you guys on the next one.